All right, we are here for the Transform Dialogues, part of the People Strategy Leaders podcast, live at Transform. My name is Zach.
I'm Amy.
And we're joined by
Brian Elliott.
Brian Elliott. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
This is a really exciting day here at Transform. There's a lot of things going on within the world of work. I feel like the conversations have been pretty wild here so far.
Yeah.
And what the hell is going on? What are some of the things you're experiencing, seeing, and talking about?
I'll give you the quickie background just so you all know who I am broadly. So I lead a group called Work Forward. We're an advisory firm on future work topics. I spent 25 years in tech myself as a leader, like startup CEO, Google and Slack, leading product teams and business units, and then started a think tank in 2020 that studied flexible work. I spent a lot of time with like chief people officers, heads of workplace, heads of IT, talking about like, how do you enable your teams to get through change and turmoil? So that's been return to office, and where are we on that battle on a nonstop basis for 5 years, basically, it comes and goes. The last year plus, it's been generative AI and what actually works from an adoption perspective. And then both of those things that were sort of super hot and topical still at the end of the year have kind of a little bit fallen by the wayside, even in these conversations here, to kind of what the heck is going on in the world around us, right? So a lot of chaos, concerns about recession that are moving into concerns about stagflation, and real deep concerns about how my employees doing through all of this, because it's major turmoil. So glad to talk about any of those three themes and more.
Let's start to unpack it. I'd love to start with maybe the return to office piece.
Sure.
And right, because we've been through the last 5 years, COVID opened up this incredible opportunity for companies to evaluate remote work. It forced them into it, right? And it opened up now this whole potential for companies, right? And now we're also seeing this wave now of return to office.
Yeah.
In some ways, it feels very forced, and I don't know maybe you can speak to this, like where some of the reasoning or urge to return to office is coming from.
Yeah.
When we have found that it's a pretty engaging strategic move to stay hybrid or remote. So it's like, why are some of these mandates or like on a return to office pushes happening so aggressively for some companies? Are we unaware of some type of like strategic advantage that this comes with, or am I simplifying it where it's like, I don't know, like what's going on?
Of thoughts that the headlines tend to get written by the people who are being the most extreme and changing their minds the furthest, right? So Amazon, coming out of the pandemic, said, hey, we're going to be virtual first. We're going to let directors figure out what's the right pattern for their team. Then they went to 3 days, then they went to 5 days, right? Jamie Dimon may have other ulterior motives to some degree. I actually believe him that he believes genuinely it's the right answer. But that's part of what you're seeing is it's CEOs, especially when it's a 5-day mandate, it's very often the CEO themselves who's saying, this is the right answer. And it's the right answer because this is how I came through the system. This is what made me successful. And there's also some underlying issues and challenges that we can get into, but that's a big part of this is like, I actually genuinely may believe it, but it's also based on my understanding of how work worked for me. I've had board members of companies say, in the 1980s, when I was coming up through the system, this one lunch that I had with the guy who turned out to be my mentor made my career. Like, dude, you were highly successful. And that was the 1980s, right? So let's think about this more broadly. What's happening overall, about 2/3 of firms still have flexible work policy. Flex Index tracks literally 9,000 companies in the United States. Last year, that didn't change much. More people are moving towards like 3 days as being the right answer. And for most people, if your team is co-located, meaning if the three of us are on the same team and we live in the same city, 2 or 3 days a week is fine. And most people are accepting of that. The challenge is a lot of organizations are now the teams are distributed. So you see this in like Microsoft's data, 75% of Microsoft teams, the manager and the people who work for the manager don't live in the same city. Saying I have to be in the office 3, 4, 5 days a week to be with my team, it just doesn't make logical sense. And it actually slows things down if you are across time zones, because then so you want me on the West Coast to come into an office at 9 a.m. That means I lose an hour commuting that I could have been on a call with my East Coast counterparts. So there's no right solution here, but a top-down mandate generally doesn't work, and neither does complete individual chaos. It's finding that solution in the middle that works on the basis of things like, is my team co-located or are we distributed?
We had a conversation with another guest where we were talking a little bit about like return to experience, right? Or return to intentionality. So if there is going to be a reason for people to meet together in person, let's have a very clear agenda and take something away from it. Are you seeing companies take that approach?
Absolutely. I've actually got about 15 companies that are actually in a working groups with me that basically gotten over the hump of like how many days a week is a magic number. And are thinking about how do we actually invest in learning and iteration to make it work. So Zillow is a great example. Zillow has a small central group of, I think, 4 people that orchestrate gatherings across the entire organization. The product engineering and marketing teams get together 4 times a year, and they do it for project kickoffs and mentorship and belonging and relationship building. But most leaders aren't very good at, like I've been in C-suite conversations where I've said, hey, you guys have to actually get your people together and spend half the time on relationship building. And I get these like panic looks of like, what would we do during that time? So they also help people build an agenda, think about the activities, who are people you can bring in to do that. That type of even quarterly engagement, there's data that shows it actually is a better boost because it's purpose driven, to your point, rather than the random chance encounter in the office.
Yeah, I think people are more willing to invest the time if they know that there is an impact coming out of it.
That's right. That's right. And there's patterns around those moments that matter. And it depends very much on like, how does your function or your team work, right? So product design and product engineering coming together around projects makes sense. Junior salespeople being together more frequently also probably makes sense. Those are very different patterns you have to establish.
Yeah, but if we're going to come back to the office, sit in our cubicles, not talk to each other, and do the same thing I could have done in my home office.
Absolutely. And especially if I'm coming back to an office that looks like it did in 2019, where I can't find enough meeting rooms. And by the way, I'm spending my day on calls, and all I'm doing is hearing everybody else's calls. That's why people basically bodily reject it, because they aren't as productive.
Yeah, those open office spaces, please go away forever.
Yeah, and there's a lot of workplace people that I work with who've actually successfully made the case for shrink the footprint, but redesign what we're leaving behind and invert it from being like 70% about individual space to 70% collaborative space. Yeah. There's a lot of other workplace leaders who are still trying to convince leadership that, hey, look, the economic trade-off works. We're not going to spend any more money, but I need you to free up the opportunity for me to do this, which means I need you to get off the belief that we're all going back to what things look like in 2019.
It makes me also reconnect with the strategic plans that we're rolling out and adding the office as a tool to execute and achieve that strategic plan versus it being maybe more like phrased or approached in an outcome based. Like we just need people to, the goal is just to get people here and that's the outcome we're going for. That's right. Just to be in the office and how do we realign it to be more of an input towards achieving our goals as a company, right?
Yeah. Technology is a tool. Yeah. Shared space is a tool, right? It can be your office. It can also be flexible space provider because a lot of these firms have realized I don't have a big enough body of employees in the city to take a lease. So I should use a flexible work provider for the monthly gathering or the 5 people that need it every day.
So speaking of technology and tools that are coming into our workforce, into our employee experience, obviously, I think AI is a hot topic here at Transform this year.
Oh, yeah.
And outside of Transform everywhere. And now we're at a point where agentic AI is making its way into our workforces. Yeah. What are you really excited about or seeing with this?
So huge amount of potential, meaning, and in things that I think people are starting to get over the fact that this isn't just a productivity or an efficiency game. Matter of fact, that's actually problematic in how it's positioned. But you've got the potential to do things like provide people with better coaching and mentoring tools, which actually can do things like close a gender gap that exists. Like 26% fewer women get a coach or a mentor at work. And it's been persistent for decades now. We're not fixing it by actually addressing the human causes, but you might be able to make it a little bit better by giving people access to tools that will at least help them in the early stages in ways of working. The bigger, broader issue is like if flexible work, if the return to office thing doesn't work because of the top-down command to use generative AI to get more efficient also doesn't. You can see it. We're now like a year into the same stinking data. About a third of employees have adopted these tools and are using them pretty regularly. 15 to 20% adopted them and aren't telling you about it because they're afraid that they'll be seen as a cheat or that their job is at risk. And the other half are sort of sitting on the sidelines, right? But if you can't get people to understand like what the ultimate goal of the business is, what are the outcomes I'm trying to drive, when they hear efficiency, they think layoffs. It's the same problem as when I hear get back in the office, even though I've been productive at home, what I hear is you just want to monitor me, right? In order to have me generate more, visibility. So the better answer on both of these is what are the outcomes we're trying to drive? And it has forced a lot of companies to get whispered about. Like Synchrony Financial out of Connecticut, fintech firm that basically did away with the annual performance review, moved to a lot of other people are starting to move to, which is a quarterly goal setting and assessment process. Every manager, every employee, it's a heavy lift. You have to invest behind it. But if you can do that, you're starting to have more frequent interactions that are about what are the business results we're trying to create. If you can do that, you also get away from presence as being the indicator of performance. And you get away from fears about generative AI stealing my job because you know that the objective is to generate more revenue, bring in more customers, build more products. That's mutual gain, right? It's better for the company, it's better for the individual, and it helps get rid of some of the fears that what you're actually after is pushing me out of the business.
How might an organization start to approach that conversation within their company, right? Like if we want to really embrace this technology, make it a part of our people's roles and enable them to leverage it as a tool. And I think it's interesting, the stats that you shared, right? Like whether we're pushing it or not, people are still using it. So
That's right.
How do we help them be intentional and more strategic, effective with it? We don't want to cross the communication with creating this narrative. Well, they're probably just making me do this to replace me at some point, right?
Yeah.
So we want it to be a people first productive strategy. How does the CEO or company approach that? Like what are some ways they can do that?
A big thing to do there is to think about that not as being the CEO's job and CHRO's job. It's actually the individual leader's job. And that's hard because we've often underinvested in our frontline leaders and managers. But there's actually good evidence that's starting to show up about the fact that if you actually talk about this as a team, if your manager sits with you and experiments with these tools together, and don't make it about work at first, actually make it about, how do we actually get used to using some of these tools for things like build a recipe or something? You actually get people talking about it. What you're actually then doing is you're creating a permission structure. You're talking about norms. What's acceptable use with it? A friend of mine, Helen Cupp, runs a group called Women Defining AI. They're trying to help close the gender gap in technology adoption. They actually started running these programs where people do 5 to 15 minute snippets of hands-on activity every day for 3 weeks. And it starts with the most basic things of prompting and works its way up to custom app building, right? And if you do that as a team, you're not only learning, but you're actually having a conversation about what's okay for us, what's not okay for us. And you're having the open discussion about what are our norms in it, and you're getting people involved in it. That requires investment of time, energy, and resources at the frontline level, not just a memo from, the CIO that says, here's the new tool we've rolled out.
You also talked about how these AI conversations, while still very relevant, have taken a little bit of a backseat to the world just being what it is today.
Yeah.
How are you seeing CPOs, CHROs lead the conversations within their organizations? I don't know if you're familiar with Edelman Trust Barometer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it came out. Workplace is still, but it's still one of the places that is most trusted by individuals. So they're looking to those leaders to guide them. How are they taking hold of that?
Yeah. So being a chief people officer has been hard every year for the past 5 years. And it got worse again this year in a lot of ways. And so a lot of the conversations I've had with people here today are, how are we taking care of ourselves and our own leadership teams? So I'll give you a really concrete example. And that goes back to like that team building and engagement and trust. You're probably familiar with the concept of first team. Who's my first team, right? And at the executive level, you've really got to make sure that you are building trust within that executive team today, because the year ahead of us is going to be rough. And if you don't have trust within that group, then things can fragment and fracture and fall apart. So you need to do it with your leads and your directors within your people team, but you also need to do it across that. So that kind of comes back even to like the Zillow example I was giving you, but like getting that group together because they probably live in different places at least a couple times a year and spending time getting to know each other so that I know that I can trust you, Amy, so that I know something about you, so that when something goes awry, I'm not going to, misinterpret something you said. Or if I do, I'm going to call you up and talk to me. So we're in a time of high stress. Resilience is going to be a really important thing to develop individually and in your teams. But if it doesn't have a foundation of trust among the leadership team, it's going to be even more.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And how are you seeing it impact the individual employees too? Because, I think we all kind of originated in our working where you check personal at the door, right? You walk in, you turn into the, stone face, nothing bothers me.
Yeah.
And that has evolved a lot, certainly since COVID. I think that there was suddenly this opening that happened.
Yeah.
And now it's with 24/7 access to information, it's pretty much impossible to check anything personal at the door to work. So
It is.
how are we helping employees stay a little bit focused, feel safe, feel that they're in an environment that is going to help them continue to grow and succeed?
Yeah, it's really hard. Like burnout hit new highs last year also. It's not going to get any better this year between the do more with less mantra. We're in the third year of efficiency. So the pressures on people have been really high. Folks are now rightfully concerned about a recession or stagflation. So 24 hours ago. And that's got people concerned about, the economy, their personal lives and what's happening and layoffs and all the rest of it. The war on DEI also impacts, roughly speaking, half the working population. And I think the challenge as leaders is bring your whole self to work. Understandably may have swung too far on one side of the pendulum. Right? I worked in tech for 25 years. Tech tends to go from one pole to the other. Tech went, excessively pro-employee. Plenty of people who sort of took advantage of that system. Now they've gone all the way the other end, which is sit down and do your work and get your nose back on the grindstone. There's a medium in between that we need to refine, which is vulnerability with boundaries, to, take Brene Brown's term for it, which is how do you and I have a conversation that says, it's okay for you to say, hey, I'm having a hard time at home. It's going to be a rough week. Can somebody help me out on a couple of things? I need you to be able to do that. That doesn't mean that I'm your therapist and that I'm here to help you solve that set of problems. But if you don't help people figure out how to have those conversations, then people will hit that burnout break point. And I think this year we're at risk of pushing that over the cliff. And so that trust issue, again, is going to become really into the forefront, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're obviously at Transform. The ethos of Transform is very much on the transformation of work, the big disruptors, changes in both people's strategy, but also even technology and people tech. Yeah, I'm curious of any bold predictions, thoughts, strategies that you feel organizations should be on top of or aware of to stay ahead of the curve. What's your bold prediction or thought?
We're seeing this big surge back to command and control, right? There's a big push back to command and control, and whether it's return to the office or do more with less or all the rest of it. I think that's going to backfire on a number of large firms. And it's not necessarily going to backfire because some of their people won't do it. But I think there's such a huge opportunity for the innovator's dilemma that's coming out of all this, right? That mid-size and smaller, more nimble organizations can do a lot more with generative AI to go a lot further, a lot faster. I see this in my own industry that I've been in for years in SaaS, right? The newer innovators can actually build more capability and functionality. And if you are a 70,000 person, 150,000 person organization, it's just harder for you to make those changes and adapt. If your answer to that is, I'm going to command you into adapting it, you're not going to get as far as these guys are who are going to sit there and say, hey, look, here's the outcomes we want to drive. Here's the rewards you get. And we'll allow you some freedom and flexibility to get there. And that kind of engagement, I think, will win long term. So it is going to be hard to prove, but I think the command and control thing is going to push some people into underperforming.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to increase the odds that they get increasingly displaced over the next 5 years by an even faster generation of new capabilities and technology to come up from underneath it.
And that's a pretty exciting future for those companies that embrace that more. It sounds more playful, right? More playful, experiential, agile approach to saying, hey, I'm a high level of talent. I want to experiment and I want to achieve outcomes too, right? Like people are energized by that.
That's right.
But let me have a playful, flexible approach to how I do that.
Yeah.
Like that sounds really exciting for me.
I mean, I was a startup CEO for
Yeah.
a dozen years. And what I learned over the course of that was, often through the School of Hard Knocks, is this whole treat strategy for breakfast thing is absolutely true. I was at another event recently where somebody asked a group of senior leaders, like, would you take the C strategy with the A team, or would you take the A strategy with the C team, right? And the A versus the C on the team isn't necessarily the talent. It's, can you actually get them aligned? Can you get them actually focused on the job and on what you're trying to build and understanding each other and their strengths and weaknesses? And that's what I learned, right? That if you can do that, then you don't have to have the world's greatest strategy, but you're still going to outperform somebody who's like telling everybody to get into the same square boxes.
Well, that's exciting. I feel very energized by that vision for those companies that embrace that type of, I guess, mindset or philosophy on how to run a team and an organization. And so, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. I appreciate you coming and sharing your perspective and your thoughts with our network. And this has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.